Welcome, everyone. I have a little bit of a different blog post this week. This week, it's not really a blog post. It's me interviewing one of my now former clients, Jennifer. Jennifer recently graduated, as we like to say, in the health coaching business just a couple of weeks ago after absolutely destroying her half marathon goal and accomplishing a whole bunch of other stuff along the way. But we'll get into that. And I just wanted to have Jennifer kind of share her story, and she graciously agreed to do that on video because I probably couldn't do it justice trying to write about it. So I figured a video interview would be kind of interesting and a nice way to share about her journey. So I'm going to let Jennifer just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself, and then we can jump into the good stuff.
All right, so I am Jennifer. I live in Dayton, Texas. I am married and I'm a mom to a 16-month-old girl. I'm a new stay-at-home mom. My previous life, I was a chemical engineer. So one of the goals that I had Ryan help me with was trying to get in shape for half marathons, because it was something that I did pre-baby, something that I was interested in continuing to do. So I wanted help because I wanted to do it healthy and I wanted to do it the right way.
Yeah, and I think the whole postpartum experience that we worked through is an interesting topic to talk about. So I definitely want to touch on that along the way, because obviously I don't have a lot of experience in that area personally, although I have 2 kids of my own and have my wife, observed my wife go through similar experiences, but personally I can't relate to any of that stuff. So I definitely want to touch on that, because I feel like there's a lot of mothers out there that, you know, are athletic like you, or have trained or have done, you know, whatever, just been active in the past before baby, and after baby it's not easy. It's not easy getting back into it. So I definitely want to touch on that a little bit along the way, so because I think it's quite an interesting topic to talk about, and you crush that aspect of it as well. And your daughter is also super cute. So Jennifer and I worked together for about 6 months. And I believe you came to me about 9 months after you had your daughter, right? Is that true?
She was 9 or 10 months, something like that.
Okay. And so can you tell everyone about, like, leading up to your pregnancy, and then during your pregnancy, and then the 9 months after your pregnancy, how you were eating along that, you know, during that time?
Okay, leading up to my pregnancy, I decided to try the low carb keto approach to running half marathons. So I was eating anywhere between 20 and 50 carbs a day while running close to 30 miles a week. When I went into my pregnancy, especially first trimester, I did not follow any kind of low carb approach. I ate what I could stomach. Once I got past the morning sickness issues of the first trimester, I went back. I was definitely not keto, but I was definitely lower carb. I tried to keep it about 75 grams of carbs a day. It worked pretty well for me. After I had my daughter, I slowly made my way back to being the keto athlete. About, I guess, 6 months postpartum, I went back that route. I noticed initially postpartum breastfeeding exclusively, keto was not in the cards at all. But I noticed that once she started solids, I was able to start doing the keto approach again. And I started doing some weightlifting while doing keto. I was not happy with the results. It seemed that it wasn't as easy this time around going the keto approach. And I was tired and didn't feel good. And I wanted to start running again, and I knew that I needed help doing that because I wasn't happy with how I was feeling, and I really wanted to get a different perspective on nutrition because I wanted to feel good, especially for my daughter. I didn't want to be tired all the time. No, that's not a great way to show up for your daughter. And I wanted to enjoy the process. If I enjoy running, I want it to be fun, right? I don't want it to suck. So that's when I found Ryan, and I asked for help with nutrition, help with running, help with feeling better, not being tired.
And I think I had written down here when we first started working together, you were eating around kind of like around 185 to 200 grams of protein. Like you said, around 20 to 50 grams of carbs, and your fats are anywhere between 170 to 180 grams. So you were certainly low carb and not skimping on protein by any means. You're way eating a ton of protein, which is not a bad thing, not a bad thing at all. But certainly something I don't see too often, especially in my female clients. So I was actually kind of excited to see that. But I remember you had come to me and you were like, I'm hungry all the time. Like, I just want to eat all the food. And I think that caloric intake came into around 2,500 calories, if I had done some math correctly. And just for context, you were 29 years old at the time and around 5'8". So you were eating a decent amount of food, but still hungry, and you kind of had, if I remember correctly, you just weren't really satisfied after eating. Is that kind of, am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I would eat a meal that like I would think is, ridiculous amount of calories. And I would step away from it and be, wow, I'm still hungry. Like I could eat that again. Like I never felt like I had eaten enough after any of my meals.
Yeah. So one of the, I think, can you talk a little bit about, I don't want to speak for you, so I want you to talk a little bit about some of the dietary changes that we made along the 6-month journey that kind of, and I know there were ebbs and flows, right? Based on when you were breastfeeding, when you were weaning, and it kind of went up and down, but kind of the dietary changes that we made along the way around across the 6 months, and some of the challenges with doing that and some of the eye-opening moments you had along the way.
Yeah, so one of the things I really wanted to experiment with, and you were very, okay with me doing this and encouraging me to do it, is I wanted to increase carbs. I didn't feel like keto was working for me. One, because I was hungry, and two, I was tired. And we took a slow approach. We would add 25 grams of carbs every month or two. I know we went from like 50 carbs up to 75 grams of carbs, and I would stay there for a while, see how I was feeling. When we did that, I noticed immediately that I started to feel better. I had more energy. I was more satisfied after meals. When I was breastfeeding, it made my supply better. My menstrual cycle, I did not have any kind of PMS like I was having. It just kind of disappeared. I just felt better all around. And then the same story when we went up again to 100 grams of carbs, probably about 3 or 4 months into our coaching relationship, and I felt better again. I was even more satisfied, more energy. I felt good. And another area that it helped with by increasing carbs also is sleep. I think that was an important factor. I was really struggling with sleep, especially as my training got more intense. I was doing more weightlifting, longer runs. At the end, like the last couple months, we decided to go ahead, let's bump the carbs up to 150 grams a day. And my sleep improved tremendously. I was sleeping all the way through the night, which is good because if my daughter's sleeping through the night, I want to be sleeping through the night too. So Yeah, it was a huge improvement. I stopped waking up having to use the bathroom. I didn't wake up hungry in the mornings. I just felt better all around.
Yeah, and my approach is very regimented. I'm not going to be like, I didn't want you to go from 20 grams of carbs a day to 150 grams of carbs a day, right? There's a whole bunch of reasons why I didn't want to do that. No, one of the bigger reasons, like digestion, just giving your body time to adapt, right? But talk about some of kind of because I think this is where a lot of people get hung up, and it keeps them from making dietary changes like this, whether it's adding carbs or taking out carbs or adding more protein or taking out protein, whatever it is, right? Changing your dietary mindset. What was the kind of the biggest struggle for you around doing that?
So I have always equated, well, really since my teenage years when the whole Atkins diet thing happened. My dad actually did the Atkins diet, and of course the whole family did it because that's how now mom cooked. And I ended up, because I was a little bit overweight, and I dropped 25 pounds without even trying, right? I just ate what my mom cooked. And so in my mind, I had equated carbs with being overweight. And so anytime we would bump the carbs up, I had this demon in the back of my head going, "You're going to get fat. You're going to get fat." It was really hard to do that. It was mentally hard to overcome that and make myself eat the carbs. But I mean, I felt better too. So it was hard to argue with the results of how I felt. And not to mention, and I don't think that, this should be overlooked, is that without trying, without decreasing calories, I lost almost 10 pounds effortlessly. All I did was add carbs. It was isocaloric. I never decreased my calories. It's like I made my body happy.
And yeah, and I think you said two important things there. And one is tying the dietary shift to some kind of problem or struggle that you're having, right? So like there are a couple times along the way, obviously there was the hunger issue and satisfaction issue with your meals. But then, a couple months down the line, it started to be like a sleep and recovery issue, right? You weren't sleeping very well, and you had interrupted sleep, and not because your daughter wasn't sleeping, but because you were getting up to use the bathroom, and you were saying that you weren't recovering as well from your strength training workouts. And to me, that sounded like just a carbohydrate / calorie issue, right? And so once I said, okay, well, let's add the carbs a little bit more. And I remember you saying, I want to, but I'm a little, I had this mental block about it. And I'm like, well, let's just try it. And if it doesn't work, we'll back off and change direction, right? And once you said, oh, I'm sleeping through the night and I feel a lot better doing workouts, then it was easy. Right? It seemed like everything clicked, right? And you had mentioned also just the weight loss, right? And tying carbs to your body weight, right? And your body composition. And obviously there's no way around it. Yeah, we didn't decrease calories. We probably just increased your activity a little bit. And it could be, obviously hormones play a role here too as well. And sleep, etc., right? And less stress and all this stuff, right? So I think that in combination with the additional carbs, let your body kind of shed some weight that it might have been holding on to. And do you mind if I share the graph from Chronometer that shows this, right? Because I think this is epic, right? Let's see if I can just share my screen quickly so everyone can see it. And I'll include this in the blog post for other people that might not be seeing it. So can you see that, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. So this is straight out of Jennifer's Chronometer. And I love this graph. It's just a graph comparing her body weight and then her carbohydrate intake. So the purplish pink line here is her carbohydrate intake. And then the bluish line here is her body weight. So you can see the trend line, which is the thick line in between, just kind of averaging everything out. You can see she has a pretty significant bump here. She was below, we started below 40 grams of carbohydrates, and she ended, like she set up, peaking up over here around 150 grams of carbohydrates over the 6 months, and this steady decline in her body weight along the way, right? And I'm not attributing this to the decline in her body weight to carbohydrates, right? Because I'm not saying that you increase carbohydrates and you're going to lose weight. I'm just showing you that they're inversely associated here, in that her increase in carbohydrates did not increase her weight. She increased her carbohydrates and decreased her weight, right? And felt better and performed better and had better body composition, et cetera, right? So I think that's a huge mental block for people. And I'm glad that you let us share that experience, so that people can also get that, get over that mental hurdle. Because everyone I've worked with from that starts on a low carb diet has this mental hurdle, including myself. And so it's a hard thing to get over. Cool. Anything else? Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. What kind of carbohydrates were you eating, over the 6 months? Did you add back in?
A lot of like starchy, like potatoes. I ate a lot of sweet potatoes, red potatoes, bananas, berries. That's the bulk of it. And then just eating lots of vegetables, a lot of vegetables.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think this is an important distinction, that we associate carbs with weight gain. And I think we just lump everything into that, right? Whole food carb sources included with Twinkies and Snickers and cakes and cookies and chips and all that fun stuff, right? So they're generally, especially for someone who is as active as you and who's training as hard as you are, there's no reason to not eat, whole food carbohydrates from, like you said, potatoes, fruits, vegetables. Even I'll have some clients who like white rice and oatmeal and stuff like that, depending on the person. So, those are all fine as long as you're active and using those things and metabolically flexible, right? And then this is another important point. Jennifer is completely metabolically healthy. She ran some blood work in, towards the end of our 6 months working together. It looked fantastic from my unprofessional, non-doctor point of view. She had no signs of metabolic issues at all along the way. She didn't have, crazy tiredness that we didn't expect after eating, or, waking up feeling completely hungry, all that type of stuff, right? Cool. Anything else from a diet point of view that we didn't cover?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think that pretty much covered it.
Cool. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is training, right? Because you had mentioned about training for your previous half marathon, that you were running around, what you said, 30 miles a week, right?
Yeah, in the peak,
Yeah.
30 miles a week.
And how many days a week was that?
I was running 5 times a week.
How many days were you strength training then?
At that time, none.
Okay. So after you had your daughter, you were doing primarily strength training, and then you had decided that you want to, try and do another half marathon. And so that was our athletic goal, right? So, and the half marathon you were doing was the Austin half marathon, which was in February of 2022. And to start, I put you through a little bit of an assessment period in that first week, as I do most of my athletes, and kind of tested your aerobic and anaerobic capacity, as well as some just strength stuff. And I believe to start in that first week, your easy MAF/zone 2/aerobic pace, whatever you want to call it, was around 14 minutes per mile.
Mhm.
Right. And so tell me about the training that I had you doing. What did you think about that? How was that, in comparison to what you were doing in the past? And how did it end up influencing the outcome of the half marathon?
Yeah, so I guess what I did before was purely everything was the maffetone heart rate training. I didn't do a single run except for I would do a tempo run like the week before a race. And so everything was low intensity. I did no strength training, it was purely running. This time around, so what my training looked like with Ryan was I would do 2 days a week of strength training, which would build in number of sets as we would progress along. And then 2 low intensity runs at my MAF heart rate, and then we do 1 speed day. At first I was a little bit skeptical. I did not think I was running enough. And I was really nervous about it because obviously what I was doing before, I was running 5, sometimes 6 days a week. I was trying to get in 30 miles a week. And I felt that I needed to do that in order to really train that low intensity fat burning part of my metabolism, right? So that I just felt that was the right thing to do. And so I was a little bit skeptical at first, but I remember it was in October, end of October, I had my first long run, and it was a 10-mile run or a 2-hour run. I can't remember. I ended up running 10 miles, but the first half of it, I was running at my MAF heart rate. And then the second half, he told me just to go by feel. And I was amazed at how I felt during that run, especially at the end. I remember as I was logging mile 8 and then 9, like how strong I felt. I recall when I was running before, when I was doing just running, no strength training, like I could feel my posture on long runs start to give, like because I was getting fatigued, right? But with the added strength training that I was doing, I never had any of that. There was no fatigue in my posture, which, I mean, that was huge. I finished a 10-mile run when I hadn't done anything even close to that since before my daughter was born, and I felt great afterwards. It was eye-opening, and it really opened my eyes to how important strength training is when you're a runner.
Yeah. And, I definitely, when I work with clients, I try to, customize things to their not only what I see as a strength or a weakness of theirs, but also their desire, right? I mean, um, you preferred to run more than strength training, so I gave you more running than strength training, right? Your aerobic pace isn't to start out wasn't terrible for someone who's 9 months postpartum and hadn't been running for a very long time. So I didn't need to throw a whole ton of just low intensity training at you. Like you had a 14-minute pace. It wasn't going to meet your half marathon goal, but it wasn't too far off and it wasn't terrible. Um, so and yeah, and I think that what you said about strength training not being kind of a focus for most endurance athletes, I think is something I see a lot where they either do very little or none strength training. And when you get to the extremes, like when you're trying to run 100 miles, like, yeah, I mean, you need to be able to run 100 miles. You don't have a lot of time to strength train, but even then, I think it's important. And for someone who's running a half marathon like you, or whose goal is a half marathon, we don't need to be running 5-6 days a week. And so we can fill those other days with strength training. And that has a lot of benefits, like you said. as far as just having the strength to endure the multi-hour race that you're trying to do, right? And to not fatigue at the end. And to, like you said, so one of the other things, what was, when you actually did the half marathon in Austin, what was like, what was the biggest surprise there as far as the course was concerned?
Well, I did not realize that there was going to be nearly 600 feet of elevation gain over the course of the race. So that was a big surprise.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you think that the strength training probably, made it possible for you to actually do that type of elevation, right?
Oh, without a doubt, because I live on the flattest place on earth. If any of you have ever been to the coastal plains of Texas, it is the flattest place on earth. And so none of my runs have hills at all whatsoever. Like I might have a run that's got 3 feet, right? Like
Yeah.
it's nothing. So this was quite the test of my strength. And I think that the strength training that we did, I mean, it very much prepared me. I was able to still, even after 600 feet of elevation gain that I was not expecting and not able to train for, I was still able to kick it into another gear in the last mile of that race.
Yeah. And this is exactly why, one of the reasons why I view strength training as critical for endurance athletes. And the other reason why is, did you have a single injury in the 6 months that we worked together?
No.
No. She never once complained to me that this was sore, didn't feel right, or anything like that. She went and tackled a trail run like a champion, and didn't hurt herself there either. And yeah, so I think that for injury prevention and just the strength to run for multiple hours at a time, strength training is critical. And just tell everyone a little bit about like what kind of things you're doing during your strength training routine. Like what kind of stuff do we program?
A lot of, well, I mean, there were squats, there were split squats, like single leg type exercises, deadlifts, a lot of push pull for the upper body, pull ups, which I think was huge for back strength, shoulder strength. I mean, it was full body. And then there's also some purely core work in there. And it was all done with free weights, squat rack, some bands, and then some TRX stuff. It was actually really fun to do too. I really enjoyed what I was doing.
Yeah, so a lot of like full body compound stuff, nothing fancy, like we're just talking about like your basic push pull lifts of your upper and lower body. Like Jennifer said, working on the core, because the core strength is important for maintaining that posture, is talking about your breathing, not getting fatigued as you run. And she said, mentioned some single leg stuff, right? So when you're running, you imagine you're at multiple points as you run, you're on one leg, right? So being able to do single leg type of split squats, or doing a deadlift on one leg or something like that, is important especially for runners, right? It's important for everyone, but especially for people who are running. Yeah, so nothing terribly fancy, and like she said, it's only 2 days a week. It's and I try to keep it fun and entertaining to what people like to do too. Cool. Anything else from a training perspective? How did you feel about like the higher intensity days that we had? Are those beneficial?
I think they were very beneficial. Well, it really helped on race day knowing what did it feel like to run at that higher intensity, and I knew what to expect. And I just thought they were fun. It was fun to go out there once a week and kind of just see what I could do.
Yeah, I think there's obviously the physiological benefits of running at higher intensities and getting your heart rate up there, and that's one thing. But like you said, the mental capacity to know that you can do it, one, and to endure the suck, right? Because it's going to suck on race day, and if you don't have the mental capacity to know that you can endure that suck for an extended period of time, it's gonna, it could potentially be bad. I like to include some amount of higher intensity work if their aerobic base is decent to start with, right? And it's just 1 day a week. It was never terribly long either. We're talking around 20 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more as we get up into the higher training blocks and we're trying to peak for race time. But we kind of keep it, relatively short and sweet, just to get your heart rate up there. And like you said, just get that mindset to know that you can do it. And when it comes race day, it's going to be there. Anything else, from a training perspective?
I don't think so. That pretty much covers it.
Do you think the strength training, sorry, I keep on thinking of additional questions. Do you think the strength training, do you think that had an impact on the body composition changes?
Yes, I do. I don't know how to articulate that, but I believe that it did for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that probably played the biggest role in the positive body composition changes that you saw. I know you took some before and after pictures yourself, and you said there was definitely a noticeable difference.
Oh yeah.
Between when we started and when we finished. And there's this epic picture which I hope you let me use along with this post of when you're finishing the half marathon, your arms are raised, and I was like, wow, she looks jacked.
Oh wow.
I was like, she got some muscle there. So didn't look like.
I made fun of for my face in that picture. So
Oh, I love that. I love that picture. It's epic. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's definitely important from that point of view as well. So I think we wouldn't be doing things justice if we didn't touch on a little bit about kind of the challenges of just being a mother and life in general, and things around stress and sleep and hormonal changes along the way, and just that type of stuff. So can you touch on kind of like the other lifestyle pieces that don't get a lot of attention, your sleep and all that fun stuff, and how that some of the challenges that you had with that, and what maybe some of the things we did or didn't do to address some of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think a really eye-opening thing for me in this whole process was how much more stress there is when you are a mom. And I had very unrealistic expectations of myself. And I expected everything to be as easy, or I don't want to say easy, but when I trained before my daughter, there were no sleep. I never had any sleep disruptions other than, your typical stuff, right? But when my daughter going through a sleep regression or teething pain, I have to wake up in the middle of the night. You think of the stress involved with that, and then you have training, what you have to do for training that day, and then also, running after a baby all day and working around her schedule. I think was one of the hardest things is fitting everything that I wanted to do training wise around her schedule, and the stress involved with that. Like if she wakes up when I'm trying to lift weights, like my weightlifting is messed up. So I think just it's more stressful. I don't know how else to put it. There's so many more time demands on you, and it plays a huge role on, like, you have one, I guess, stress tank, right? And the training stress compounds on top of all the stress that you already feel as a mother of a young baby that you're trying to do right by, on top of not sleeping well because maybe she didn't sleep well, and then your own sleep issues on top of that. And it was hard, um, really hard, much more difficult than I ever anticipated. And it definitely was, I had to give myself some grace, and I'm not very good at doing that as a general rule. But I know Ryan, some of our calls, he had to kind of talk me off the ledge a little bit, like, calm down, like, you're a mom now, like, you're not just working and running, like, you got so much more on your plate. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's something else you wanted me to say.
No, I think that's perfect. And because like I remember you coming to me and be like, I remember asking you about your sleep when we first started. You're like, oh, sleep's great. Like I sleep fine. My daughter sleeps like a champion. And I'm like, okay, we'll see. Like because I mean that is one thing I know as a parent, right? I mean, when my kids were that age, uh, I would get up when the kids would wake up. If they were not, it wasn't time for them to eat, essentially, right? So if it wasn't time for my wife to breastfeed my son or my daughter, then that meant it was my turn to get up. And so I know that you know you'll go through times where sleep is great, and this doesn't have anything to do with just being a parent either, right? There's going to be periods where your sleep is just epic, and then something's going to happen in your life and it's not going to be there anymore and it's going to be bad. And what are you going to do then, right? And how do you deal with that stuff? And my answer, and as I always tell all my clients, regardless of what situation they're in, whether they're a new mom with a young child at home, or they're they're just a single guy, who has no other responsibilities. If your sleep isn't good and that means that you can't train that day, like, okay, no big deal, like, don't stress about it. And like Jennifer said, she's that type A driven mentality that a lot of people, endurance athletes, just have that personality. And if something is not perfect, or they don't get their workout in, or your daughter wakes up or your son wakes up when they're supposed to be napping and you're in the middle of working out, which always happens,
Mhm.
and you have to stop and go deal with it, or completely cut the workout short, or you have to go for a run with your daughter in the stroller, which I know was a
Yeah.
staple for you.
Mhm.
You just got to go with the flow of things, right? And just because something goes wrong for a week straight or one day, like, it's not the end of the world. It's not, we can work around it. Just because something's not perfect doesn't mean that it's not useful. And so, that was those things are certainly challenges along the way. And what was the one thing that we did towards the end that you found useful that I started programming in your weekly workout schedule?
We started
Mm.
programming in self-care, very specific, because as a type A high achieving person, like, I feel like I have to be all things to all people all the time, and then I forget about myself, and then I have these days where I just, like, I blow up, right? Because I'm not taking care of myself. And me and Ryan talked, I was like, I have to have something my, in our little app that tells me to go take care of you, do something that makes you happy, relax, whatever. And I mean, that was huge. At first it was, I mean, actually through the whole time, there was a lot of pressure, because I had to think about, well, what is it that I really want to do, right? Like, and then there was the guilt associated with it, that, oh, but I'm not there for my husband, or I'm not going to be there watching my daughter, and I'm going to make him have to watch her, and all of, but it ended up being really great. And he didn't,
Yeah.
my husband didn't mind at all. And, like, I had all these preconceived notions about how he would feel about it, and none of those things were true. And I mean, I still, even though, I mean, it's been a couple weeks since Ryan and I worked together, like I'm still thinking about it on the weekends. What am I going to do for me this weekend? How am I going to use my time so that I feel refreshed, so that on Monday when my husband goes back to the office, like I'm ready to take the week on.
Yeah. And I think that's important. It's something I learned along the way myself too. Like I can completely relate to that, feeling guilty taking time to care for yourself and not do something for your family, or, if you have a job, like, doing whatever work might be laying around or whatever work around the house, there's always something to do, right? The to-do list, no matter what situation you're in, usually is always there. It's never ending. And you always have this pressure to get something done. And so, finding that time, at least sometime during the week, if not spread out throughout the week, to just do something for yourself. Hopefully you have, if you are a parent, you have someone that can just take the kid or kids for just an hour or whatever, to allow you to do that. And I know it's a challenge sometimes. Believe me, we don't, my wife and I don't live for a portion of time a while ago, before we lived where we currently live, where we didn't have family that was close to us. And so having someone take the kids was just, even for me and my wife to get away and do something was almost near impossible. Luckily now we have family close by, we can do that. But there are times still where my wife says to me, or I say to my wife, hey, I'm gonna go do this, thing on Saturday or Sunday. And maybe it's a massage, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's, I'm gonna go read a book, right? I literally took some time, a couple days in the past 2 years, where I just went on a trip by myself. I rented an Airbnb and just went to a house by myself for a few days, right? Just to mentally, detach from everything, right? So having these self-care opportunities is just important. Again, this is not specific to being an athlete. This is like being a human being in today's modern world. Like this is nothing to do with athletes, but athletes have that added stress of, and you don't have to be an athlete. This is someone that's just, maybe you're just exercise 6 days a week because you like exercising, or you're trying to change your body composition or whatever, right? Having this time to be a human being by yourself and detach and relax and take a stress break, to take some of that water out of that stress bucket, as they like to say, is just so important for everyone. Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything. Is there anything else that you think we should talk about that we didn't cover?
I think so. I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I know it's kind of hard to cover 6 months in less than an hour, but I think we did a fairly good job. Go us. Cool. So I wanted to thank Jennifer for taking the time and being willing to share her experience, because I think it's useful for everyone to hear. I hope everyone, whether you're a mom or a dad or a single person, endurance athlete, non-endurance athlete, I think you took away something from the conversation. And Jennifer is too modest to say this, but she's also an aspiring health coach. So she is a wealth of knowledge, and part of the reason that she was able to be so successful and accomplish all her goals was because that she has a lot to give to start with, right? And made my job as a health coach that much easier. So Jennifer, if people want to reach out to you to talk to you about your experience, or just follow along on your journey as you become a health coach, whatever, is there a place that they can do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook, so that Jennifer Higginbotham. And I'm also on Instagram. It's health design underscore coach Jen, I believe, or the other way around. Anyway, so you can search Jennifer Higginbotham and find me. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, I'll put links to that stuff if people want in the blog post associated with the video, so you can find her and reach out to her if you want to. And as always, if you need to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. At RJB Health Coaching is my handle on everywhere. So you can find me there, and or you can go to my website at rjbhealth.coach and blog through or browse through the blog posts and videos and sign up for the newsletter and all that fun stuff there. So once again, thanks Jennifer for spending some time with me. And if you have any questions for either of us, feel free to reach out and we'll talk to you all soon.